We usually start with the flag salute, so I think we'll go ahead and try and do a flag salute. You can join me as we salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I want to thank all of you in attendance. This is our first Zoom meeting, and we want to thank you for your chamber membership and all of your support for the Greater Newport Chamber. We plan to continue holding luncheon forums throughout the summer, and it will be on the third Friday of the month. So if you have any suggestions for featured speakers, you can contact Jeanette at the Chamber office. Today's speaker is Representative David Gomberg. I'm pleased to introduce our featured speaker. David is a small business owner, kite flyer, and member of the Oregon House of Representatives, our District 10, since January 14, 2013. Representative Gomberg is here to talk about the legislative session. If you have a question, you can type it into the chat. Chamber Executive Director Judy Kuhl will field questions and present them to Representative Gomberg at about 12:40 p.m. If we don't have time for all of the questions, Representative Gomberg will also share information about his office number, and I know he'll be glad to get back to any of you that had questions that we don't have time for today. So we'll make sure you all get your answers, even if we can't fit them in during the meeting. I have told Representative Gomberg that I appreciate his attendance and participation at so many local events and fundraisers in our community. I also like to attend a lot of the local events, and I see him at everything, and I really appreciate that. And he seems to be very approachable to the local community, so I greatly appreciate that. Without any further ado, let me present your representative, David Gomberg.
Well, thank you, Al. That was very kind. And I'll say honestly, I miss all of you. I miss the opportunity to interact with you face to face. And I know that that not only are we suffering for that lack of in-person contact with each other, but I think so many of our fundraisers and community events and businesses are suffering for many of the same reasons. Well, let me tell you, it's great to be on a Zoom meeting with so many smiling faces. I mean, I'm coming from the Capitol, and let me tell you in all candor, it is horrible in the Capitol right now for a variety of reasons. But today is a very important day, excuse me, in the legislative schedule, because this session, we have had a record number of bills introduced. About 4,000 bills have been introduced. And I like to say that every bill is a good idea to somebody, but that doesn't mean that they are a good idea for everybody or for all of Oregon or for our part of Oregon. Today is an important day because today is the deadline. And if a bill is not scheduled for action by today, then it goes away. With a few exceptions, if a bill is in a committee and doesn't have a work session and a vote scheduled, the bill dies. And so most of those 4,000 bills are going to go away. I expect that we'll probably finish up with about 600 altogether. And of those 600, perhaps 100, 150 of them are budget bills. So that gives you an idea of how we winnow down this big pile to a relatively smaller pile. This session is remarkable for so many reasons. The most obvious of which is that usually we're not there. We are doing all of our committees remotely, just like we're doing this chamber meeting remotely. And the Constitution requires that when we vote on a bill to pass it, that we have to physically be in the chamber of the House or the Senate to do that. So we were going over once a week. and having those floor sessions to move bills. Unfortunately, some partisan frictions have erupted, particularly in the House right now. 3 weeks ago in the Senate, half of the senators chose not to show up, and they didn't have a quorum, so they had to cancel that day's business. In the House, everybody's showing up, but they are requiring that bills be read in their entirety before we vote on them. That's a procedural tact. And most of the bills are only 2 or 3 pages long, so it's not a big deal. But there's one bill on the schedule that necessarily runs 160 pages. And reading that into the record is going to require about 15 hours of reading time. So the leadership has scheduled us to come over on not just one day a week, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. They're having us be in floor sessions, not only for an hour in the late morning, but through the lunch hour. And then they want us to come back at 5 o'clock and be there until 9 o'clock each night. So that's the process that we're looking at in the Capitol right now. And most people are tired, they're tense, and they're a little bit cranky. There's one other thing that's really quite remarkable about this legislative session, and that is the amount of federal dollars that are coming to Oregon. Now, the federal government's been sending us money over the past year to deal both with COVID and with wildfires. And we have been using that money for all kinds of things, particularly to support housing, to support small business, to support counseling services, childcare, a lot of things going on like that. But I wanted to highlight a couple of big projects that have come out recently that I think will really, really important to you. One of them is that we have passed money for landlords that aren't getting paid their rent. If somebody is unable to pay their rent because of COVID or wildfires or other related problems, they cannot be evicted, but the state has offered to pay rent for them, or at least 80% of their rent, if the landlord then agrees to forgive the other 20%. This is not a mandatory program, but landlords can collect 80% of the rent that is due. And there is a bill that I'm supporting in the legislature that will give landlords a tax credit for any lost rent that they are unable to collect either through this program or for any other reason. So that's a big deal. There's another big deal for small businesses, and that is that we know that a lot of small businesses are having trouble paying their rent or their mortgage. So the state has allocated $100 million to help small businesses pay their rent if they've been closed up by COVID or by wildfires. And then there's another program that we actually voted on earlier this morning, and it puts out $250 million for summer programs for kids. This is going to provide summer school for kids that may have fallen behind because the schools have been closed. It's going to provide summer activities for those kids, and it's going to provide childcare to help out families if their kids are home and they can't afford childcare. So that's a big deal. And then there's another big deal coming up that hasn't been announced yet, and it's something that I proposed back in December and have been working on since then, and it's to help our coastal restaurants. Now, I don't have to tell you that with high risk, low risk, moderate risk, our restaurants are finding themselves open and closed, which is just devastating for our restaurants and also for the people that work for them. And so I proposed a package that would help coastal restaurants, and they would be qualifying for grant dollars. We're putting $8 million into this package, and it's targeted only at coastal restaurants. Restaurants everywhere are hurting. I believe our restaurants on the coast are hurting more than any place else in Oregon. And oh, by the way, there is a rippling effect when our restaurants have problems. One of those rippling effects is in our fishing industry, because 60% of the fresh seafood that we land in Oregon, and you know how much comes through Newport, 60% of it goes to restaurants. So if restaurants are closed, then our seafood industry is suffering. And there's one other aspect of this, and it has to do with when our restaurants and bars and taverns are closed, they're not selling lottery tickets. And if lottery tickets aren't sold, then we cannot issue lottery bonds. And you're sitting there saying, what's Gomberg talking about? Lottery bonds are what we're going to pay for the first installment on fixing our Newport dams. Lottery bonds were what we were going to use to pay for expansions at the Oregon Coast Aquarium. Lottery bonds were going to help out the Cultural Center in Lincoln City with $1.5 million that I got for them. I felt so good last session that I'd come home with these 3 big dollar victories for Lincoln County. And then when we couldn't issue the lottery bonds, all of that funding evaporated. So I have now been talking to the leadership of the Ways and Means Committee about the newest round of federal dollars that are coming to us, saying, let's not wait for lottery bonds to fund these projects. They've already been reviewed, they've been vetted, they've been approved. Let's just put the money straight into projects. There are 30 of them around Oregon, 3 of them here in Lincoln County that I just mentioned. I want to get them funded sooner rather than later. 2 more things I wanted to touch on, and then I want to hear questions from all of you, please. One of them is that you may have read stories earlier in the year relating to the fires that we suffered in North County back in September. And one of the issues that came out has to do with, imagine this, the tax consequences of losing your home. And one example of that is that if the fire is late in the year, your home is burned down, but you've got to pay property taxes for the whole year. That's crazy stuff. Another one is that your house burns down and you have to pay the school district a construction excise tax. That's an average of about $1,500 before you can begin replacing the manufactured home that burned down. And so I have sponsored legislation to give school districts and local government the opportunity to waive those taxes when there has been a natural disaster like a fire or a flood. And I've written them so they're retroactive and will cover people that suffered losses in 2020. I've also written them so that if we end up having another major natural disaster, like an earthquake or a tsunami, that again, that local government can waive those tax implications and give people a break if they've lost their home. The final thing I want to touch on with you, and then I want to hear your questions, please, is redistricting. Every 10 years, we go through an exercise where we redraw our congressional and our legislative districts because of possible changes in population. Congressional districts, which means our congressmen and our well, not our senators, but our congressmen in Washington, D.C., and the 5 districts that we have here, hoping that that's going to increase to 6 with our population growth. But where will those districts be? And then where do we draw the lines for our Oregon legislative and Senate seats? So we go through this process based on the numbers that we get back from the census review. Well, unfortunately, the census is running way behind schedule, so we don't know if we're going to have those numbers in time for the legislature to do this job. And if the legislature can't do it, then the Constitution says it'll be done by the Secretary of State. And if the Secretary of State can't do it, then the Constitution says the courts will figure it out. But in the meanwhile, we all need to figure out where we want our lines to be. And here's the issue. Our part of Oregon has increased in population, but Portland has increased more. So if we've gotten more people here, we expect our districts would get smaller. That's the logic of it, because more people will fit into a smaller space. But if Portland has grown faster than we have, then actually geographically, we're going to get larger. And the only way we can grow, obviously, is we can grow north, we can grow south, we can't grow any further west, or we may end up going east. I want to make sure that when we draw these lines, that we keep the districts with a coastal focus. I'm real worried that we could take Newport and we could draw a legislative district that goes along Highway 20 into Corvallis. And they've got more people than we do, so suddenly we've got a Corvallis district. Florence could get paired with Eugene. Lincoln City could get paired with McMinnville or Salem. Tillamook could end up together with Sherwood, and suddenly the coastal identity of these legislative districts evaporates, and that means that we don't have strong voices for the issues that are unique to us, whether it is our natural resources concerns, our fishing industry, our tourism industry, the transportation network that gets people out here to spend money, and the health and science of our beaches. We can't afford to lose those voices. So I'm working very hard to make sure that we maintain the integrity of some legislative voices in these districts. It's one of those complicated, geeky political things that we go through, but at the end of the day, it's of great consequence. And it's really hard because our Senate district where we live now stretches all the way from Tillamook to Coos Bay. That district is 170 miles long. It takes 4 hours to drive from one end to the other. It's going to be even tougher if we make that district longer and thinner. But the alternative is going inland. And as I said, then we begin to lose some of our coastal identity. So I'm going to catch my breath there for a minute. Judy, are there any questions in chat that that you're ready to share with me from the good chamber folks here?
Yes, there is. So I do have a question that is, what do you see as far as college expenses and debt as the future changes with the new administration?
Well, I think if you're talking about the new administration, you're talking about the national administration in Washington, D.C. And of course, I serve in the Oregon legislature. We have been struggling with our budget this year. If we had more money, we could put more money into our universities and community colleges, and that would make it less expensive for the students that attend. If you've been following the news, you know that actually the revenue forecasts, the projections on how much money that we're going to have to work with actually have been very positive lately. Earlier on, we were worried that people aren't working, so they're not paying taxes. Businesses are closed, so they're not paying taxes. People aren't buying lottery tickets, so we don't have lottery revenue. About the only place the state was making more money during COVID was with the sale of alcohol and cannabis. But not enough of that was being sold to make up the big gap that we were seeing in those other tax categories. Now what we're finding out is that people who are working through COVID are actually doing fairly well. And those tend to be the middle and higher income jobs. And that people who were struggling during COVID were getting additional unemployment compensation, and they were getting stimulus checks from the federal government. So overall, their income package is in good shape, relatively speaking, good shape as well. So, so the state's going to have enough money to balance our budget, but because our forecasts were originally low, state law says if we bring in more money than we were expecting, we have to give it back to the taxpayers in something called the kicker. Even if we don't have enough money to maintain the services that we have right now, if we brought in more money than we were expecting to, we have to give it back. So we are still struggling to balance our budget. At the same time, we're going to be sending refund checks out to Oregonians in the form of a kicker. Well, technically, we don't mail you checks. Technically, we give you a credit on your next income tax so that your refund is bigger or your tax payment is lower. But my point is that we're going to be refunding money that we might have been spending to help college students. And that's really, really frustrating to me.
So I have a question while we're talking about taxes. What have you heard, and do you think it will pass that Oregon can tax PPP money?
An interesting question. And if I'm not mistaken, technically, we're not actually taxing those PPP and stimulus and grant dollars, but it affects your overall tax rate, which is this one way or the other, you end up paying more. Mm-hmm. And our some members of our congressional delegation are interested in fixing that. Some members of our Oregon delegation are interested in fixing that. I'm certainly interested in fixing that. I have talked to the tax leadership in the House about how we can go about it. And there is a bill that was introduced by our state senator to try and address it on the Senate side. I'm not seeing his bill moving forward because, well, the Senate's a different planet and the politics over there are much different than in the House. I'll just tell you that we are looking at how we deal with that. And Judy, my crystal ball says there's a 50-50 chance that we'll get some changes made so that those stimulus and PPP dollars and other grants are not taxed or don't affect your taxes here in Oregon.
Thank you. I've been watching that one. I have another question. Will anything be done to address the thousands of people that will lose their health coverage when they file their taxes this year? OHP only covers people making less than 1,396 a month. That's $8.73 an hour at 40 hours a week for under minimum wage.
Well, I have not heard of any proposals to increase the threshold for the Oregon Health Plan. That doesn't mean it's not going on. I'm just saying simply that I haven't heard about it. Right now, this session is focused primarily on COVID, wildfires, and balancing the budget. That's where all the attention has been. And my crystal ball says there's not a large likelihood of us making an adjustment in the qualifying thresholds for the health plan this year. Possible, but I'm not seeing it as being real likely.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, what are the chances for funding for capital constructions for arts heritage projects statewide, championed by Cultural Advocacy Coalition?
Well, you know, I'm on the, I co-chair the committee that handles the Cultural Advocacy Coalition budgets. And we are looking at trying to sustain our commitment to the arts and to culture, at least at the current service level. None of our budgets are increasing very much right now. In fact, originally we were instructed to look at writing budgets that were 7% below what we're currently spending. With the announcement of all these new federal dollars, that direction is going to change. Bottom line, I'm expecting to write a budget that keeps our culture and arts support at its current level. Not an increase, but at least maintaining it and not cutting it. So Judy, I'm gonna talk about another infrastructure project that's near and dear to Newport. And
Okay.
And I met recently with the Quinte Bay Economic Foundation. This was the first question they wanted to ask me. You know what it is? What's going to happen
what it is.
Bridge? Our bridge that was built in the 1930s and has got one lane north and one lane south. Can Newport expect us to be investing in a new bridge anytime soon? Great question. The short answer is no. The short answer is that we are investing in maintaining our coastal bridges, but not replacing them. I raised some questions with ODOT, and they told me that their lower estimates for replacing the Newport Bridge were about $250 million, which is more than half the total money that the state has for bridge projects statewide right now. They will maintain the bridge, but they're not looking at replacing it. And that's true of all of our coastal bridges, and there are a lot of them that are aging because they were all built at the same time. And then the conversation took an interesting turn because there was a but. We're not planning to replace it, but if the local community would want to commit to us tolling these bridges, then we would have the ability to start raising the money and look at replacing them. Boy, there's a provocative question. How do we feel about putting a toll booth at either end of the Newport Bridge? That's a good news, bad news thing. I mean, it's certainly bad news for those of us that drive over that bridge on a regular basis. It's awkward because our population center is on the north side of the bridge. Our community college is on the south side. So many of our businesses are on the south side. Our airport, our animal shelter is going to be on the south side. I was scratching my head at that a little bit, and I kind of facetiously said, could we structure it so that you only pay a toll going across the bridge if you have an out-of-state license plate? There's options for these conversations, but if we want to get closer to looking at that major infrastructure project in Newport, tolling may be a part of the conversation, and we need to be ready for that conversation and be ready to express how we feel about it.
Yes, I was part of that meetings and very interesting information that you gave. So I do,
Go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say, I do have another question for you. This one's on unemployment benefits. Are there any plans to return Oregon unemployment benefits to the original levels now that businesses are reopening, keeping in mind that businesses are having trouble finding employees?
Yeah, I understand the problem. And very early on, when the federal government started supplementing our unemployment compensation and stretching out the number of months that you could qualify for unemployment, there was a concern that you can make as much money staying home as you do going into work. Or that even if you made a little bit less, that staying home is a lot more fun than going to work every day, and you still get those checks. The the decision to extend benefits is being made at the state level. The decision to augment them with federal dollars is coming to us from the federal government. So I'm not in control of that part of it. There's a lot of other things going on here that I'm really concerned about. And we can start by saying that the employment division just simply wasn't ready for a tenfold increase in the number of people making claims. And they did a horrible job of taking care of folks that were out of work. You've all read the stories. You couldn't get through on the phone lines. You had to wait a month before you started getting benefits. The numbers were wrong. I've pointed out that we had a record number of claimants, a record number of new employees, 1,000 new employees at the employment division, and a record number of new rules coming down on how those dollars are applied. That is a formula for a record number of mistakes. And they have been making their mistakes to the point where the governor actually replaced the director. And I've got a lot of confidence in the guy that's running the program now, but he continues to struggle. There's two other aspects of all of this that I'm working on. The first one is that when the agency makes a mistake and sends somebody too much money, the current law says that we can only get that money back by taking out of your benefits the next time you're unemployed. Well, wow, that could be years from now. And oh, by the way, are we really going to take money out of somebody's unemployment benefits when they're out of work? That's really kicking people when they're down. I'd rather, if they got too much money, I'd rather get it back from them when they're working. And so I've written a proposal to change that so we can do a better job of collecting the money that we overpaid. This really factors into the whole question of whether or not your unemployment taxes are going to increase because of the huge number of people that were unemployed this year. And some of you have probably gotten letters warning you about an increase in UI taxes because the state made you shut down and lay people off. The other thing that's dealing with unemployment compensation, which is really kind of eerie, and it has to do with fraud. It has to do with people who are trying to cheat the state. And a lot of this is coming from outside the country. In Washington, they learned that about $200 million was sent off to false claims that ended up in Nigeria. That's the kind of problem that we're talking about. And I have asked the director of our employment division, how big a fraud problem do we have here in Oregon? And here was his answer. I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you what the problem is or how big the problem is, because the more information we put out in public, then we're warning people who are trying to cheat us that we're onto them, and it's harder for us to stop them. That's a bit of a head scratcher, isn't it? You know, I want to know if we're being defrauded. As a legislator, I want to know how it affects our budget. I want to know how it affects the unemployment trust fund. But I don't want to know so badly that I'm willing to risk our ability to catch those people. So the answer I've given to the employment division is, I'm going to give you some time, but I'm going to want to know the answer to that question in detail as soon as we're able to get that information. So you asked one question, I answered three, but I hope you find some of that stuff interesting.
Very interesting. I myself personally, I think that instead of unemployment always getting the extra 300, there should be some kind of a incentive for people to be able to show that they have recently gone back to work.
I like that. Judy, I'm going to tell you about another bill you haven't asked me about yet. It has to do with, oh, watch your face, everybody. It has to do with the cost of OLCC permits. And here's the deal. In the last year, we've learned how to do things differently, especially with our fundraisers. So what's going to happen with the Wine and Seafood Festival? We're selling wine and seafood baskets. But because we're selling them online, instead of getting one permit for the festival, you had to get how many permits?
Or,
4 permits. There was the potential, because you had your webpage open for 30 days, that they would have made you get 30 permits. The same thing happened over at the community college with their Pearls fundraiser. And they allowed you to go pick up a dinner and a bottle of wine and then tune into their fundraising program. And because you could pick them up in Lincoln City or in Glen Eden Beach or in Newport, they had to get 3 separate permits. This is money that's coming out of scholarship funds. This is money that's coming out of chamber program funds. I've written a bill that would, and it's a retroactive bill that says that that you can have 1 permit to cover more than 1 location and more than 1 date, as long as it's for the same basic event. And I'm hoping that you're going to be able to request a refund for 3 of those 4 permits that you had to purchase.
that would be great, because we ended up paying $50 a day for every day that we were selling those baskets. So,
Yeah, that's really wrong in my mind. It's just one of the unforeseen bureaucratic complexities of COVID.
does anyone else have questions? I don't see any more in the chat. This is your opportunity if you do.
Well, let me ask you questions, and I hope some of you will unmute and chime in, or Judy can call on you. I want to know how you're doing. I mean, we're a year into this thing. We're getting our vaccinations, and so our vaccination rate is going up. Our positive rate is going down. Because a lot of people have been exposed, that means that that they've developed some immunities. We're opening up the schools. And of course, we're opening up our businesses as we shift to low risk rather than extreme risk. I'd like to hear how some of you are doing and what your experiences have been. Who wants to tell me? Should I call on some of you?
Well, I'll speak up, David.
Please go ahead.
I've got a comment. So, particularly with the schools opening up and those kinds of things, we've had feel like we're going to get at the end of this week internet or disconnect for kids that maybe don't have a whole lot of good Wi-Fi. So that's a godsend for them to get back into school, and then they can not be maybe their healthcare or their child care provider and trying to learn. So there's a lot of friends that my daughter in school that she tells me about, that their situation isn't great. And then when they don't have brothers or sisters to watch, their internet is really poor. So has there been any improvements in that, or any thought on, if we continue to stay in a lockdown, what that might look like for some of those families?
Well, goodness, first of all, I hope we're not going to stay in a lockdown, and the governor wants kids getting back to school. But particularly here in rural communities, broadband remains a problem. And we're putting more money into broadband, but it's not an overnight fix. So yes, we're investing in it. No, it's not going to be ready tomorrow. It certainly wasn't ready yesterday. But you're absolutely right. It's a huge problem, and we need to make improvements, not only for our kids, but another aspect of this that I've been saying quite a bit the last year. A year and a half ago, I was developing proposals to encourage people to work remotely. I argued that if you can work from home, you can have your home anywhere. And instead of being in the large metropolitan area, you can be at the coast, or you can be at the mountains, or you can be out in the gorge. And we can take some of those good paying jobs that are in the city and bring them out to our communities. We need a good broadband infrastructure to make, excuse me, to make that possible. But here we are a year later, and we've got more people working from home than ever before. I would like to get some of those good paying jobs out into our rural communities. And a statistic that I have been repeating until people are tired of hearing it is that median family incomes in Oregon in the last 10 years have gone up 20%. In Portland, they have gone up 30%. But in Newport, which is the economic driver in my district, median family income has gone down 6%. Up 30% in Portland, down 6% in Newport, and largely because of all those new good paying tech jobs that are clustered in the metropolitan centers and not enough of them out here. So other feedback on how you're doing. President Al, you've got a unique circumstance. You're teaching remotely? You're muted, Al.
Actually, I was going to do a follow-up question on the broadband first thing, because I have understood that the federal government was trying to get a lot more money into rural communities, which I would think we would qualify for. Have they not really followed through very well on getting us some additional money to improve the broadband in rural communities? Because a lot of your district is really qualifies for extra help, wouldn't they? Or could you give us an update on that?
My street certainly does. But yes, the answer to your questions are yes. The federal government has provided more money. The state is focusing on the broadband issue as well. But as I kind of suggested a minute ago, we don't get it fixed overnight. And so I think that we're going to continue to see improvements, but I don't think we're going to see them immediately.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm watching the clock, Judy. It's 20 till.
Okay, we got time for maybe 2 more questions. Maggie, do you want to ask the question, or Josh, whichever one of you? They wanted to know if there is a bill that would require change to unemployment or incentive sizing to go back to work, or when could we see one?
I have not seen it provides an incentive to go back to work. I mean, there is something related to that, the earned income tax credit, which for lower income workers augments your income, but it's not directly connected to whether you were on unemployment and now you are employed. It's a general program that helps lower income workers and encourages them to be working with additional incentives rather than not working. It's called the Earned Income Tax Credit.
That one's been around a long time, is it not?
Yes, it has. It has been around a long time. It's not COVID related. It's not related to our specific experience this last year.
Well, you know, you're asking how are we doing, and the reality is, from a business standpoint, many of us are doing really well, especially in the lodging side, but we're really, really struggling to find people to work.
You know, that's always been the case at the coast. I mean, it was certainly the case when I was an employer trying to find people. There are help wanted signs everywhere, and I think it's an ongoing challenge. It's connected, as many things are interconnected. I keep talking about the search for employees, the quality of our education system, and the availability of housing. And you know, here in North County, we lost 300 homes that were workforce homes, and a lot of those people have just simply moved away. That's a problem. I'm not trying to dodge your question, but another aspect of all of this is that there have been a number of bills that have come through the Capitol that are trying to help people who are renters and getting rid of no-cause evictions, stretching out the prohibition on evictions, a lot of different things that are designed to help renters. And I have been resistant to a lot of them, quite frankly, because we have what I think is a unique housing situation here at the coast. In the big cities, most rental properties are owned and managed by large corporations. out here, we've got an awful lot of mom and pop landlords, people that invested in property, often for retirement income. And so it's not a big corporation. It's just somebody that owns 1 or 2 properties that they use for income. We also have a very vibrant nightly rental industry, vacation rentals. And I believe that the harder we make it for you to be a landlord, the easier we make it for you to change your property over and put it in the nightly rental pool. And you know, the vacation rentals, they're not all these large houses on the beach. There's a lot of smaller properties that are back in neighborhoods, and they can be rented out for the year to a family that wants to live here and work here, or they can be rented out by the night to a family that's looking for a less expensive getaway to the coast. But at the end of the day, a third of the people who work in Newport commute into Newport from outside the city, and housing is a big part of our workforce shortage. And until we can find a place for people to live who want to work here, I think we're going to continue to face shortages.
If I could speak to that, because I work in the real estate industry, because the state has made rules so difficult for landlords, like you're saying, that there are some people who are selling their rentals and getting out of that industry. And so we're coming up with fewer houses to be rented because landlords have no control over it. And if you've got somebody who's not paying their rent, they're doing drugs, you know, these are things that affect them, either 1, making their house payment, or 2, if they get their home condemned for people using meth or things like that inside that home. So definitely that makes it easier for the nightly rentals. And it's always amazing to me that the state doesn't look at it from that standpoint, that there should be rules to protect renters, you know, that you're not jacking up rent on them. That's, you know, obviously not fair. But there also should be some really good recourse for a landlord to be like, you're not making your payment or you're misusing the property, you got to go. Sure.
Incentivizing small landlords. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. That's not a COVID cough, that's my winter cough. Jessica, another thing you'll be interested in, here's one of those interesting decisions I've got to make. There are proposals now to eliminate mortgage deductions on second homes. The argument is that if you can afford a second, like a vacation home, you probably don't need the mortgage deduction, and we can use that money for schools and healthcare and universities and transportation. But here at the coast, I mean, I'm sure you sell as many vacation homes as you do residential homes. It's a huge part of our industry here. And I am not inclined to support a bill that's going to undermine our real estate industry here at the coast.
And I do the lending side of it, not the actual selling, but yeah, so I see it all the time. And it does really, you know, I think your middle class workers are the ones who feel that they are being taxed at every single angle. If you're rich, you've got your loopholes, you can get out of paying the taxes. If you don't make enough, we're not going to tax you anyways. So every time a new tax or a toll or some of these things come in, you're just re-taxing the exact same group, and they're getting taxed out, which is, I think, where you see a lot of anger and stuff with the government part of it.
Indeed. Well, Judy, do you need time for a door prize drawing?
Well, unfortunately, we don't have a door prize drawing, but we are out of time for you, David. And I am going to thank you for joining us. And I'm going to pass this back over to Al Fitzpatrick to finish out our luncheon.
Well, I always enjoy seeing you. Thanks for having me. I look forward to seeing all of you in person as soon as possible.
Want to thank David Gomberg again for speaking to us, and again want to thank you for attending everything in the community over the years and being so accessible to people. I really appreciate it. I don't always agree with every vote that you do, but I absolutely support the amount of chamber events and community events and fundraisers and everything else that you attend, and how easy it is to approach you and ask a question. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Al. You know, we're not all going to agree on everything every time. My wife doesn't agree with all of my votes, and I hear about it. But but yes, at the end of the day, I think we've all got more in common than we do separating us. So thank you very much for your kindness. And again, I look forward to the time when we can all show up in those community events again.
Yes, thanks again. We had a question on why we didn't have both Representative Gomberg and State Senator Dick Anderson, like the college had them together. Why we didn't have them together? We're going to do those separately. We have a shorter meeting and we really don't have time for them to present and ask questions in just a short session. So we're going to have Dick Anderson a little bit later as our state senator, but we separated them so they each get their own time. Want to ask you to stay tuned for our next meeting. It's going to be on April 16th, which used to be about tax day, but I guess you get a little extra time for taxes this year. I think we get till about May 15th. So, but anyway, it's going to be about that time. Also, we're going to have you save the date for this year's online auction. It's going to be Spring Fling and Auction Things. It'll be May 10th through 16th, about the new tax day. There will be great packages to bid on. It's going to include this year's seafood and wine, inventory of wines. And we have a special thanks to our presenting sponsor, Ripley's World of Adventure. Believe it or not, Ripley's is our presenting sponsor this year. And we have some additional sponsors. We also like to thank US Bank, Farmers Insurance, Susan Beck, and Next Home Picket Fence Realty. And we do always reserve some time for announcements. So if you have an announcement of an event that is coming up in the near future, and we'd like to keep them brief so that everyone gets to present their event, we'll pass that around the chamber membership. Who would like to present their event?
I'll go. So we are not sure on a date yet, but we will be starting Sunday brunch soon. So please watch the Facebook page for Sea Glass Bistro for when that will begin.
Josh, is
Sounds
that going
good.
to be a buffet type or a plated brunch?
That will be plated.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
We have some additional events coming up.
I just wanted to say I will be getting together with the Lincoln Pops Big Band board next week. We're going to discuss when we're going to reopen our third Thursday concerts and, you know, getting back to rehearsals and things like that. We have no idea, or at least I have no idea right now when that will be, but I would imagine it'll be closer to maybe mid end of summer. I'm not quite sure, but please keep us in mind for future events that they would be taking place on the third Thursday of the month. When we do resume, I will let everybody know in advance.
Sounds good. And thank you for playing at the start of our meeting. That was really nice. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for indulging me.
What other events do we have? Jed, anything with Porthole Players coming up?
Well, this last weekend we just had a video production of a play, but it was for limited time. It was only on Saturday and Sunday, although we may be re-releasing it in the future. We have to make a separate licensing agreement in order to do that. Right now, since we have no idea how things are going to be operated at the Performing Arts Center for the rest of the year, it's kind of hard to even schedule anything for the fall or anytime soon.
Yeah, understandable. And we look forward to getting productions back on our local stage. Portal has done some great productions over the years, and we'll look forward to those resuming as soon as possible.
Yeah, right now our plans are more aimed at next year, when we can be fairly certain that we can have at least a sizable cast plus audience in a shared space. For the rest of this year, it's still kind of up in the air.
Yeah, understandable. Thank you, Jet.
Mhm.
So I don't have an event to announce, but I do have some exciting news from Habitat. We are opening right now for homeownership partners is getting ready to close on March 24th. So we'll be selecting 2 new partner families to help us build their future homes. We also this month are closing on the townhomes in Newport. So 2 new families are joining the Habitat homeownership program officially. And we just had 2 homeowners who finished paying off their mortgages and now are mortgage-free and full owners of their Habitat homes, which is just kind of a nice congruence of activities and very exciting for us.
Good.
Congratulations. That's great. And your restore is a great opportunity to get some building materials and also support Habitat. So a lot of us try and support your restore as well.
If you have anything you want to donate, give them a call. They're happy to come out, take a look and pick it up. And if you are looking for something, you would be amazed at the kinds of things we get coming through there. Some really nice furniture and desks and just anything you can think of, sometimes very unique items. So stop on by, do some shopping. If you are planning to replace your furniture with a new look this spring using those stimulus funds to update your house, if you have leftover building supplies, give us a call. We'll come pick them up.
I've done both. I've donated appliances, and I've also purchased light fixtures and other items there. I've also referred renters who moved to town and are looking for furniture, and they've gone there and found a whole house full of furniture right away. So you have a great restore there. Thank you.
I actually have a comment. At the Port of Newport, for both marinas, on the commercial marina, you may see that we're working on the pier, at the pier at the Port Dock 5 there. And right now you don't see anything happening. Well, the work is being held behind the scenes. So they're preparing the next parts to assemble the pier that they demolished. So if you see that, don't be surprised. It's not like we stopped the work. It should be done and completed here in the next month. And appreciate everybody's patience with that if anybody happened to walk around. And then if you happen to have a boat at the recreational marina, we will be changing the load centers here next week. So, and we actually getting a generator so nobody will lose power. So just for your information, thank you.
Thank you, Paula, for the update.
Al, I have a question for the group if I can.
Sure, we'll have to make it quick because we got to get you out on time.
Okay. I know that many people are not ready to meet in person yet, but there are those that can. I realize the chamber is not ready to do in person at the moment. But are there people who'd be interested in doing a watch party where they actually get to meet with people? They get to watch this event in person. Is there anyone ready to do that yet? Thank you. I only saw Barbara there. Is there anyone else?
Maggie, Sonia, Catherine.
Catherine, Ryan, Al.
Once I get vaccinated.
We
Go
would
get
love
it
to do
done.
a watch party here at the Best Western. We'll set that all up if everybody would like to do a networking during chamber watch party thing.
I would. I'm about to get vaccinated pretty soon, so I'm in.
That's awesome. Thank you.
It's good to see you guys.
Yeah.
Really good.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up. I want to again thank you for joining us today, and also want to thank you for your chamber membership and for your support of Greater Newport Chamber. I hope everyone has a great weekend, and we'll look forward to seeing you at our next meeting, which will be April 16th or maybe before. So thanks again for everything. I also want to again thank our Representative Gomberg for a great presentation today, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone soon.
Okay. All right, thanks, everyone.
Bye, happy spring.
Hi, Catherine.